All right, we have another very special speaker today at the Disruptive Public Education Conference or Summit, if you will. And before we introduce our speaker, we do want to give a shout out to our sponsors. We have Wise Pies Media. It's putting out amazing content around education. We also have the Educational Leadership Podcast with over 60 episodes interviewing superintendents and board members around the great state of Texas. And we're going to be expanding that here soon. And then we also have Ideal Impact. Ideal Impact's given hundreds of millions of dollars in funding to schools around Texas. Nearly 20% of the schools in Texas are getting funding from Ideal Impact, unrestricted funds, does involve the taxpayers. So if you want to think outside the box and get some additional funding, reach out to Ideal Impact. Okay, today we have our next speaker. We're almost halfway through. We're covering so many different topics. This is about sharing the good word around public education, all the exciting things happening, generating new ideas, because there's a lot of conversation around public education today, and we're sharing some of the amazing things happening. And hopefully these topics can give you some additional ideas to transform your district even more. And so, Superintendent Clugston, thanks for joining us.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
Hey, we're glad to have you. For those who don't know, we had you on our podcast earlier in the year, and it's such a delight to have you back for this summit.
Well, excited about it.
Absolutely. And will you have a presentation today, or is it more?
Oh no, I'm not really a PowerPoint kind of guy. No.
Okay, no, I get it. It's good to have some to change things up a little bit. That's always cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to hand the stage over to you and let you begin with your topic. If you can, share your topic and just dive right in.
Well, really, you're at the Disruptive, School, conference here, and so I think disruption is really what we need. Talking about today about leadership and culture, and how we utilize that in our school. But to me, we've got to understand the battle we're fighting. We talk about homeschooling, we talk about vouchers, and we talk about all these curriculum programs and everything else. But, every decision that gets made, especially on the policy level for schools and especially at the state level, really is designed for that middle class student, what's more convenient for them. And the same battle has never changed. It's always been that group of kids that how do we get this group of kids to do well? And we're talking about the group of kids, years ago, it was a smaller group than it is today. But how do we get this group of kids that doesn't have much of a home life or doesn't have anybody at home that knows how to be successful? How do we make those kids successful? And that's always been the battle. The problem is I've been in this business, my 33rd year. And what I've seen is that group is getting bigger and bigger. Destruction of the family unit is a real problem, and it's growing. And so, there's certain things that kids have to have. We look at, if we take kids that go home to loving parents that have high expectations and teach them about accountability, I got news for you. Whether we do a really good job in education or whether we do a mediocre job, those kids are going to be fine. Those kids are going to be successful, because they've got parents at home that are going to see to it. The future of education is how well do we educate the kids that don't have that? And, we talk about, things we need to do for them, but we really don't change the system. I was at a conference yesterday, and they were talking about how do we make the current system successful? Well, if you're talking about those kids, it's really not set up to make them successful, because we expect some, program to solve it or here's a new idea and this will take care of it, but it's not. When we look at, like, if we take industry, industry's talking about, gosh, we need kids that can do A, B, and C. Well, here's the thing. We have those kids. The problem is those kids aren't going to work right out of high school. Most of those kids are probably going on to some further education, whether it be a 4-year university or a 2-year university or a trade school. Those kids have a plan. When we look at CCMR, about 65% of kids graduate with that. When we look at all these different metrics, you look at how many are meeting meets on STAR or EOC, we're up around 60 to 65%. You start looking at those things. Well, those are the kids that are coming to us having certain skills. those are kids that are going home, that those skills are continuing being developed. It's that 30% to 35%, depending on, what school you're talking about, that's a challenge. And nobody really wants to address the problem there. The legislature, I don't even sometimes think they're even aware of the problem, but that problem's getting bigger and bigger. So how do we go in and do something about that? Because basically, when we look at our job, that's the battle we're fighting. How do we educate the hard to educate kids? I take my kid's in 7th grade. She's adopted. She comes from, I've had her full time since she's 13 months old. She was number 5. Mama's got about 10, 11 kids now, her biological mother. And so they're not very successful. Her mother's mother had 9. And so guess what? Only one of those 9 made it out. Nevaeh's like be the only one of the 11 that make it out. And the only difference is the home she lives in and the school she goes to. And so, those things, give her all the options in the world, whereas other kids don't always have that. And so how do we make sure that every kid has that opportunity? Because that's really what it's about. It's about every kid having a chance to write their own future. And so there's certain things that have to be instilled in kids for them to be able to, to learn and be successful. And I don't know that we talk enough about those. We tend to talk a whole lot about curriculum. We don't talk enough about what are the real habits that we really need to instill in kids. And so, for us, we look at that as that's not something we can teach 7th period and, in Coach Jackson's class their junior year. These are things that get built into kids throughout their years as children as they grow up. And it gets instilled in them. If you take, most of middle class America, kids that go home to a stable home, those things get instilled at home. They get instilled at school. They get instilled at Little League, at church, at the neighbor's house, and all the circles they run in. The problem is when we're talking about our most needy population, quite often there's not anybody in the house that really knows that those habits are important. So they don't get it at home. Quite often schools aren't intentional about it, so they don't get it at school. They don't get it. They're not playing Little League. Quite often they're not going off to church or to camps or anything else, so they're not getting it anywhere. So how do we, so what do we do for those kids? Because if those kids don't develop those habits, it really doesn't matter how much algebra they know or, how much, how good of writers they are. If they can't show up at work on time and do the things you're supposed to do, it ain't gonna matter. And so we look at that. We've kind of come down to about 6 habits we feel like every kid has. And if every kid has these habits, teaching them things isn't that hard. Teaching them how to be successful isn't that hard. It's kind of the old adage, we got to prepare the kid for the road, not the road for the kid. These kids are going to go out into the real world. And so we need to be able to function in that real world. We look at the 6 skills that we really feel like every kid's got to have. Number one, kids got to be dependable. They got to, if they're going to function in the world, they're going to have to be able to show up on time and on a daily basis, to do the work that's got to be done. That's just something that's got to be in every kid. That's the same thing, at school. That's something we practice every day. Kids got to be able to follow the rules. Well, I got news for you. As adults, we got to follow the rules. It doesn't matter where you go, where you work, or what you do. There's going to be rules you're going to have to follow, and you're going to have to figure out how to play within those rules. And if you can't do that, then you're not going to be successful. And then, everybody's got to have a work ethic. Today, that's something that, even a lot of our middle class parents, sometimes they don't want to make their kid work real hard. They don't want any adversity, on that kid. And well, that's something they're going to have to be able to fight through. They're going to have to understand, things don't come easy. I mean, if gold, we could pick it up in the parking lot, it wouldn't be very valuable. People wouldn't wear it around their neck. Gold's hard to find. Well, that's what makes it valuable. Being successful isn't always easy. You got to be willing to work. So we got to make sure that we can instill that in our kids. They got to be able to get along with others. Social media is, if it's done anything, it's created, it's just allowed drama to placate, not just, during the school day, but it goes on 24/7, 365 days a year, so we've got to teach kids how to be able to build a decent relationship, a functional relationship. And quite often that doesn't get practiced at home and get practiced in a lot of other places. So that's something we've got to make sure we do. We've got to teach our kids to, solve their own problems. We live in a world where everybody's got an excuse. And it's everybody's got a reason for why they didn't get something done. Well, that's not how the world works. not if you want to be successful. So, we got to teach them how to solve their own problems. There's some major problems maybe out of their hands. We can step in those, but most of them they can solve, and, it's not, there's no reason to make excuses. You may have a legitimate, reason over here for this, but what are you going to do about it? How are you going to overcome that? Because that's what it takes to be successful. And then, we can't have kids that, we got to teach them how not to quit just because it gets hard. We got way too much people in society that just want to give up because something is harder than they thought it was going to be. And for what we look at, if a kid can do all 6 of those and I put them in a teacher's classroom, it doesn't matter if they're a struggling academic student. There's not a teacher going to complain about a classroom full of those kids, because they know they can get those kids where they need to be eventually. And so those kids are a joy to teach because they're going to put in the time and the energy and the effort and what it takes to get there. Well, if we instill that inside their heart where it becomes who they are as they go through with us, then they're going to take that into the real world. And that's the key to it. That's what we're trying to do. Teach them all the other stuff that goes along with it, whether it be, a subject matter of English or the subject matter of social studies or Algebra 1 or anything else, or whether it's problem solving skills. We can teach that a lot easier when the kids can do this. The question is how do we do these things? Because we relied for years and years on the home and the circles they ran in outside of school to do this for us. We were just an addition of that. Well, today, for our most needy kids, that doesn't happen. And so we have to understand that is the battleground. We're talking about, how well we educate the most needy kids in our state. That's our state's future, because they're the ones that are going from graduation on Friday night to we need them to be ready to work on Monday. So how do we get them ready to do that? Well, we got to make sure we instill these things in them so when they step in, they're going to be ready. And once we get these things instilled in them, teach them all the other stuff we teach isn't that hard. The hard part's instilling this stuff, because it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, a lot of love, and sometimes some tough love in order to make that happen. It's kind of like raising kids. The only problem is we don't have them all the time. We get them about 15% of the hours in a year. And so, we only get them for 15% of the time. You got to be very intentional about that time you're spending. If we can get them involved in extracurricular, get them coming to things of that nature, we can choke out some more time. Probably at best we get them 25% of the time. And that's it. That means not, the home and the neighborhood gets them the other 50%. I mean, the other 75%. They're not intentionally trying to mess them up. They just don't really know how to be successful. And so what we have to do is be very intentional about our 25% of the time if we're going to outweigh their time away from us. We need more time in the summer with them. We need them involved. To me, if we were going to change the system, that's what the time that we have in the summer, that's something we ought to be funding. We ought to figure out how we get these kids in a culture of success more and more. We need to be pushing more extracurricular activities, more time with that, investing in that, because it is about bringing these kids around in a culture that shows how to be successful. And we just don't do that often enough. We don't talk about it enough. It's always set up for the kid that really doesn't have to have it to be successful, because they go home to loving, caring parents who know how to be successful and run in circles that do that. So that's what we look at. And so the question comes in is, how do you go about and create something like this? Well, for us, it has to be in the culture that we develop as a school district. That's the key to it. And the culture can't just be coming from me, or my deputy suit, Jonathan Eggerman, and maybe a couple principals. It has to be something that everybody understands. This is the battle we're fighting, and this is what we have to instill in every kid. There's a lot of talk about equity, and not everybody has the same chance to go out and be successful. That window of opportunity isn't open the same amount for everybody. Unfortunately, it probably never will be. If you're really, really smart, if you're super gifted academically, if you're 7 foot tall and athletic, if you sing like Whitney Houston, that window of opportunity is probably going to be open a little wider. That's always going to be the case. We tend to complain about how wide open it is. Instead of complaining about how wide open it is, we want to make sure we teach every kid how to get through the window of opportunity when that opportunity comes in front of them, because then they can take that opportunity and turn it into a better opportunity. So that's our whole goal, is make sure that every kid has that ability. And if they do, then they get to write their own story. And that's really what we're after. Because if we don't teach them that, they don't get to write their own story. Society's going to write their future. They're not going to have choices. society's going to choose it. And honestly, society usually doesn't choose a very good future for them. So we're about making sure every kid has a chance to choose their own future. And we're going to instill the things in them that make it happen. So to an extent, the kids that don't have somebody that really knows how to raise them to be successful, we got to make sure we step in and we do that. So we look at our culture and how we build that and how we build that program, throughout our district. I mean, we've got almost 700 employees. We got 4,600 kids. How do we build that so that it spreads not only from us at the top or from the principal, but it spreads all the way down through our people into our kids, and eventually into our community. And then, it's kind of like the village, it takes a village to raise a kid. We firmly believe in that, and that's something that doesn't always exist today, and especially in some of our poor neighborhoods. And so we want to make sure that we are the catalyst that makes that happen. And to kind of give you, I'm going to talk a little bit today about how we work this through our culture, how we build this culture and the things that we do. The biggest thing is, we look at where we're at culture wise. We look at what our kids aren't doing well and what we need to develop in them. And that kind of becomes our theme for the next year. And we come up with a plan of attack of how we're going to go in and steal certain things, or maybe maybe our kids are not being as dependable as they need to be. It's kind of like attendance. That's been a battle the last couple of years, because after the pandemic, everybody thinks school is optional. And so, kids don't want to show up on a daily basis. And if you look at the demographics of that, it's more of our poor kids, who need the schooling the most are the ones that have the highest, absentee rate. And so how do we go in and attack that? So we pick whatever it is that we're after, and we figure out how we're going to do that. And then that has, the things we want to do to instill that in kids have to be developed and ingrained in the culture that we're having, have to be pushed by everyone. Has to be what we do on a daily basis. It can't just be talk. It can't just be a t-shirt. It can't be a banner we put in the cafeteria. It has to be our daily actions every day, not just mine. It has to be everybody in the district's daily actions that we, kids don't pay a whole lot of attention to what we say. They pay attention to what we do. So if our actions, show that, then it's a lot better for them to take it in. People ask me all the time, well, why do you think attendance got so bad after the pandemic? Well, we kept every liquor store open and we kept every Walmart open, but we closed every school. Well, obviously, it didn't make school look like it was very important to people. We can say it's important, but our actions didn't represent that. And so I think it created problems. A whole lot of people, said, I didn't think school was important. And look, the state just proved it. That's what we've got to realize. Our actions make a difference. So when we kind of develop our game plan for the year and where we want to go, it's a matter of making sure we instill that in all of our staff and throughout our organization, so that we can make sure that we are working with those kids to develop it. So we probably the first place we start, after we get that developed, is we start putting together our list for what we call leadership cube. We feel like leadership's in three levels. You kind of got your executive level, you've got your campus level, and then you also have your teacher level. And so when we look at leadership cube, that's that third level that we don't often spend a whole lot of time with. We got a lot of training for the executive level. I get conferences and everything else I get to go to, and we do that a whole lot for our, for campus principals and things of that nature. But we don't always do as good a job with our teachers. It's always training for their classroom. It's really not about leadership training. So that's something we invest in a great deal. And we look at our people for leadership cube. It can be, sometimes it's going to be teachers that are in leadership position. Maybe they're a lead teacher, maybe they're instructional coach, maybe they're a head coach of something, even though they're teaching social studies, but maybe they're the head track coach or something. So they're in a leadership position. It may be some of our teachers that really don't have any desire to be a leader, but they're very good at their craft, and everybody looks to them to get a part, to hear their wisdom, because they respect them and they know they're good at what they do. And so for us, that's a person we want to bring in the fold of our leadership cube group, because they do have influence over others because they're real good at what they do. Sometimes it's going to be some of our younger staff that in the future want to be in a bigger role. Maybe they're not ready yet, but they want to develop into that. So we want to bring them in because they want to have influence. They're eager and they put a lot of effort into it. And so it may be, those people that are in there. And then sometimes it may be some of our new people that come in that we recognize a whole lot of talent in that hasn't, maybe aren't in a position yet, but they're ones that are going to be movers and shakers. And so we put together a group of what we call Leadership Cube. And we sit down with those people and we talk to them, and it's not a mandatory thing, it's a voluntary thing to be in it, but we tell them why we want them in it, and the impact we feel like they can have on our organization. And it's funny, sometimes some of the ones will be a little reluctant to get in, say, I don't know if I'm ready for that, I'm real busy, and so that'd be fine. But then maybe a year or two later they'll say, oh, I think I want to try that, because maybe one of their colleagues was in it and talked real highly about it. And then they start, then they'll get in and start to develop them as a leader. And so a lot of times you get people that had no desire to be in a leadership role start realizing the impact they can have and the positive impact they can have if you help develop them as a leader. So we kind of picked this group with our Leadership Cube. And this group, it does two things. Number one, they're going to come to one of our summer retreats, and it's a leadership retreat. And, we run about 115 people through retreats every summer. And we usually do it in about 3 different retreats. One is like an administrative retreat, and the other 2 are Leadership Cube people. And it's this group. And so we bring them out to the farm, and we spend a couple of days talking about leadership, and then talking about what our goal is for this next year and the why behind it. And so that everybody understands the battle we're fighting and how we're going to win this battle in the current system, and how we have to change the current system in our district in order to make us effective at winning the battle. And so we talk about that, and a big part of it is the why behind it. Why are we doing this? Everybody needs to know the why. Too often we just want to require people. We don't believe in that. We believe in inspiring people, because we believe in the why that we have. And so we get this group, and we're bringing them in for one of the summer retreats. So in the springtime, we're picking those people out. Then we get into summer, March, April, May, and into the summer, into the hiring season. Every teacher we hire, me and my deputy superintendent, we sit down with them after the principals. They bring us the people they want to hire, and we don't tell them who to hire. But we do have the power of veto. But really, the main reason we sit down with them, for 45 minutes to an hour, and we talk to them about what we believe in and the why behind, and what's the upcoming battle that we're fighting, how we're going to win it, and the culture we're trying to create. And, when you get done with them, most of them are fired up and ready to go fight that battle. Occasionally we get the person that's like, ooh, I don't know that I really want to, take that on. That's fine, because we're not for everybody, and I'm okay with that. And usually they'll walk away on their own with that. And, occasionally there's somebody that they just don't get it. That's rare. Our principals are pretty good. I don't have to sit down with them, talk to them about, oh, how are you going to teach math, or how are you going to do this? That's the principal's job, and their hiring committee. My job, and Jonathan's job, when we're sitting down with them, is to let them know what they're getting into, what we're about, what we believe in, so that they make sure that that's a place they feel like they can fit and be a part of. We want them to have a passion for the same thing we're passionate about. And if you do that, then you're getting like-minded people that have the same values that we have and that the rest of our staff has. When you got shared values, that's when you can really create a culture. And so we're real big on that. We sit down with everybody. Nobody we don't hire any teacher that we haven't sat down with. That's one of those things that, it's non-negotiable. And so we sit down with any, and we're going to hire, with as many, we roughly have 400 professionals. So we're sitting down with anywhere from, 45 to say, 70 different professionals throughout a summer, depending on the year. But we sit down, we talk with them. And so, if you look at that over about a 5-year span, you start realizing the number of people you've set down that understand what you're about and where you're going. That becomes a pretty big mass of people, in your system. Well, some of those get in Leadership Cube, not all of them, but a lot of them may wind up in Leadership Cube. But now we're starting to build a critical mass within our people, within our organization, that helps spread the word. So we take that, we do that throughout the summer. We hit July, we get into retreat season, and we spend about 2 or 3 weeks of doing leadership retreats. And at that leadership retreat, day one is really about their growth as a leader. They're becoming self-aware of who they are, what they're good at, what they're not good at. And, we try and get everybody to work within their strengths. Everybody seems to spend a lot of time working on weaknesses. I know what my weaknesses are. That's why I got, Jonathan Eggerman, my deputy soup, because he's good at what I'm not. And so we really talk to them about how, you work within your strengths. And then as we build teams and we pick teammates, team teachers and everything, we work a lot on pairing people with opposite strengths so that together they share and create a team that's strong in everything. And so we talk about that during these during retreats. That's like on day one, and we go through, and then afterwards we believe in the better people know and care about each other and love each other and understand each other, the better they're going to work together as a team. And so, we're done. We're going to hang out. We're going to play some games, and we're going to cook food, and we're going to eat and just really have a lot of fellowship time with that whole group of people. And they're having time together, and quite, we may have high school people with elementary people, you got coaches, maybe with elementary teachers. And so you get these different groups, and they learn how, the struggles that you have teaching kindergarten versus the struggles you have teaching, high school math, or the struggles you have trying to, teach a seventh grader, how to read the option in football. They start to learn and have a respect for what everybody brings to the table, and they start to look at, I recognize their strengths and their strengths, and we quit looking at weaknesses and we start looking at strengths of everybody, and that allows them to become a real close knit team. And that team, the closer they are, the better they're going to work together. And so, we're doing that during the evening. The next day we come back, and and it's about spelling out our message for the year of what we're, really what we're going to concentrate on, and how we're going to get better at it. For us, it's really about, like this year, it's about leaving a legacy that's worth following. What are we going to leave behind here? We're going to make sure that we have enough impact on our people and on our kids and on our community that even after we're gone, those same values are continued. And so how do we leave that legacy? And so that's something we challenge them with, and everybody gets to get up and share. And day two's, there's some vulnerable time there, because sometimes you got to get up and talk about, your why behind why you think this is important. What was the reason for, you want to leave a legacy, and what is that legacy you want to leave, and why? But being able to be vulnerable around each other builds trust, and it creates and makes that team get closer and closer together. So we have a great deal of value in what we do at retreat. And that's a very important part of what we do. Then we get back to school, and then of course we get convocation started, and convocation is kickoff event of the year. We've got all, 700 employees in one place, and we go in and we sell that mission again. This is where we're at. This is where we've been. This is where we're at, and this is where we're going. And here's why we're going there. I don't bring in outside speakers for convocation, because they don't know where we've been, where we're at, or where we're going, and why we're going there. Who knows that? We do. So it's got to, convocation is a time for all of us to be together and to talk about, here's where we're going, guys, and here's why we're going there, and here's what we need you to do to help us get there. That's what convocation is about for us. We're excited about the mission, the battle we're going to fight this year, and everybody gets kind of like getting ready to go out on a Friday night football game. We're getting everybody fired up, and everybody knows exactly what we have to do to win it. And so convocation is a big deal. So, as we go through that week before school, we have convocation. We've got, everybody's trying to get rooms ready and everything else. We're going to carve out just a little bit of time to sit down with our Anchor Academy and talk to them, get them ready for the year. And then our Leadership Cube group, we're going to talk to them, kind of get them ready. And one of the biggest tasks they have for that year is everybody in Leadership Cubed also is a mentor for what we call our Anchor Academy. And our Anchor Academy is going to be our first or second year teachers. We might occasionally, if you get somebody from out of state who's teaching a tested area, we might put them in Anchor Academy. But Anchor Academy is going to be those teachers in need. Occasionally it might be a teacher that has a little more experience that maybe is struggling because they went to a new subject or something. But the Anchor Academy are going to be those teachers we want to help grow. And so our Leadership Cube people, one of the things they do is we match them with an Anchor Academy person that we feel like they're going to fit with. And it's generally going to be in the same grade, the same campus, quite often the same subject or team member. But the biggest job for those Anchor Academy people for the Leadership Cube people, is to grow one of those new teachers, one of those young teachers, one of those teachers who are struggling. You know, we're a firm believer the biggest way you impact is if you're a leader, is you can grow somebody else to become a leader. And so that's their task. And so we're going to meet 3 or 4 times a year. And every time we meet with Leadership Cube, we're going to have a leadership session. And then we're going to take a break and eat. And then we're going to bring in our Anchor Academy. And then we're going to give them time with their people just to talk about what it is they need and help them grow. They meet with them throughout the weeks and you know, sometimes on a daily basis. But we're going to be intentional about some of these times during the year for them to spend time with them, to help grow them, to help build that relationship. And you want that time for that Anchor Academy person to just say, you know what, I'm struggling. I don't even know what to do. You know, it's okay to struggle. It's not okay to ask for help when you're struggling. It's not okay to seek out, you know, some other people to help you. We're going to be there to support you. You just got to let us know, you know, that you need it. And sometimes they don't even know what they need. But that's okay. If they got a relationship with somebody that they trust, then they're going to say, you know what, I don't know what I need. I'm sinking. And so, you know, if that Leadership Cube person, if they feel like they don't have the time to completely help them, they're going to reach out to us and say, you know what, I got Johnny over here and he's teaching social studies and he is really, really struggling with classroom management. And I don't have time to really go by his room and help him as much. And I said, that's fine, no problem. And so we're going to get somebody, whether it be from central office or on the campus, we're going to get somebody to go by there and help team teach, maybe to be an instructional coach. And they're going to get in there, they're going to help train them, give them more help. But that's something a lot of times that, you know, as we get by the classrooms, maybe we walk by and we don't see it, but that, you know, they're sharing with us where their struggles are. And they've shared it with their Leadership Cube person. And so then they're going to share that with us. And then we're able to go in and give them support. And what that helps us is we don't bleed out a lot of first and second year people. We give them the proper support so it doesn't happen. You know, so convocation's a big one. You know, we get in with Leadership Cube and meet with them. And, you know, and this is the process we go through on a yearly basis. You know, for us in the central office, you know, we've got to become a service organization. And so we have to model everything we want to see out of our campuses. And so, you know, the things that we value, that we believe that are in our core values, we got to make sure that we're out there showing, you know, demonstrating those things every day for our people. It's like central office. Everybody in central office, we all do drop off duty in the morning. You know, we're going to be out there to assist. We don't go out and tell people what to do. We're going to go out there and help people do what the job needs to be done. And so we really model that, you know, and we developed core values that we think are essential for us to have in order to meet you know, to create the type of culture that can instill the things we want in our kids, those 6 habits. In order to instill those, there's things that we have to do. And so, you know, we look at our core values, you know, I'll share those with you. You know, what are the core values that we have? And these are things that we share with, you know, with everyone, you know, our Leadership Cube, we share at convocation and, you know, and we talk about those all the time because we want our people to understand these are the things we have to do on a daily basis if we're going to create the type of culture that gets every kid a chance to be successful, you know. And so our, you know, our first core value is really about being intentional. We have to know what the problem is and we have to be intentional about how we want to solve it. You know, that means we've got to be present on campus and we've got to, you know, be right there with it. We know what the battle is. Okay. So let's make sure that we understand that's just not passive and just words. It's something that we actively go in to try and change. And so we've got to be intentional about that, you know, and then we've got to be consistent, you know, and that's consistent in not only our rules but the effort we put in every day, our expectations for kids. You know, we can't have lower expectations because the kid comes from, you know, the wrong neighborhood. You know, we have to be consistent about our expectations and consistent in the effort we put in and consistent in how we, you know, hold kids accountable and consistent, you know, in the work product that we put out. You know, our third core value is reverence. And, you know, that's, we have to have reverence for the profession we're in. You know, too often, you know, teachers are some of the worst recruiters because we tend to gripe about our job and all the challenges we have. But we're in a fantastic and a wonderful profession that gets a chance to make a difference in this world, one kid at a time. And so we got to have reverence for that. We got to have reverence for our colleagues. You know, sometimes we'll say, well, I don't know why she does that, or I don't know why he does that. You know, we've got to have mutual respect and we have to appreciate what everybody on the team brings to the table, you know, and we got to have reverence for the opportunity to change a kid's life. Our fourth core value is resolute. We talk about with our kids, not quitting, having this resilient and having some grit. For us, we look at it as, it's a little different. How do we build that in our kids? How do we build that resilience and that grit within them? Well, we have to be resolute. The best definition I found for resolute was hell bent on achieving. Well, if we want to instill these things in our kids, then we got to be hell bent on making sure it happens. And we can't quit. We can't give up until we're successful. And then our last core value is relationships. We talk about having influence. We want our leadership cube people to have influence on their colleagues. We want our teachers to have influence on our kids. We want our kids that are doing things right to have influence on the other kids. Well, influence comes when you've got a relationship. And so we are very intentional about making sure we build relationships. I don't know every kid's name of the 500, 4,600 kids we have, but rest assured they know who I am. And, I get out there, we the whole team, not just the campus team, but the central office team, we get out, we're doing duty. We're going to the lunchroom. We might do lunch duty. We're doing afternoon duty. We're getting around the halls. We're dropping by classrooms, and I'm not dropping by classroom to see what a teacher's, might not be doing. I'm dropping by classrooms to build a relationship. Is there anything you need? Hey, how are your kids doing? Meeting the kids, talking with the kids. There's nothing better. Get out there, do morning duty, and you got, 27 kids that get out of a car and run up and give you a big old hug. And sometimes they don't even know what a superintendent does, but they know the superintendent loves them and cares about them and wants them to do right. And I think that just goes a long way, because that allows you, sometimes I need to have a conversation with them because they're not taking care of their business. And, but I've got a relationship to start with. And so when you have that conversation, they get it. And so they want to see me coming to give them praise because I'm just coming by. They don't want to see me coming by because the teacher called me. And that all starts with that relationship. And so we're real big on that. And, we do all these things, and we're intentional about it to develop a culture and a culture that kids come to and it feels different. It's supposed to feel like success, but they understand that success doesn't just automatically happen. Success happens when they do the things they need to do in order to be successful. We're all going to struggle at sometimes. All of our kids are going to struggle. It's okay to struggle. It's not okay to quit. It's not okay to not try. It's not okay to not put in extra time when you're struggling. It's okay to struggle. Just that's not where it ends. You can't just say, well, I'm just a struggler. Well, that's all right. What are you going to do about it? And that goes for everybody here. Me, Jonathan, the entire admin team, all of our teachers, all of our staff, bus drivers, custodians, everybody's a part of that. And so, and all of our kids, we're all going to struggle at times, but it doesn't stop there. What are we going to do about it? We're all going to be able to come up with an excuse on why we weren't successful. The question is, instead of excuse, what are we going to do about that? And we're going to reach out for help. It's just like my custodians. My custodians build relationships with the kids every day. Kid makes a mess in the cafeteria. They start cleaning up. Usually the custodian comes over there and isn't going to necessarily push the kid out of the way and do it. They're going to actually come over there, help the kid, help show the kid, teach the kid. They're building a relationship. They're showing them, hey, you might struggle. Here you go. Let me show you an easier way to do that. And we start building that. Everybody matters and everybody's actions really matter. And I think that's important, because that's really how we build that culture. Culture isn't what we say. Culture is how we act, how we treat each other, how we respond to each other, and what we do for each other. So I said a whole lot there. I don't know how much time I have left, probably about 5 minutes or so. But does anybody have any questions or any thoughts or want to debate anything?
Well, I want to say thank you. I was taking some notes, and one of the things that stuck out to me is the reverence, the idea of having reverence for this field and the changing one life at a time. I'm always looking for the beauty in the work that I do with working with students. And so I love when someone from your level as a superintendent mentions the word reverence for this field. So I loved all of them, but definitely encouraged by that one.
Well, it's if you look at why people, leave a job, the number one reason they leave a job is for more money. the number one reason, that's not the number one reason they stay in a job. They stay in a job because they feel like there is purpose and value in what they're doing. You know,
And you mentioned your first year, like your first year, how you don't have a lot of first year teachers leaving, and I think that's a credit also, and to your district and the leadership that you're doing with them, because those are hard years. Your first years in any job, but I think teaching for sure, we see teachers.
Well, and I think one thing that hurts us is, you get a lot of these big districts in the metroplex areas and everything, and they front load their salary schedule and pour all this money in the front. Well, then they attract a whole lot of first year people. But if you get too many of them, you can't serve that many. The year before I got here, 25% of the staff was first year. How do you serve 20? I mean, I got 360 classroom teachers. When a quarter of them are first year, you can't support that many. Now, state average is about 7%. We're running about 3%. Well, I got news for you. I got a whole lot more leadership cube people than I do Anchor Academy people this year. That's a good problem. That means I can put 1, 2, and even 3 people in somebody's boat to help them row. And if you give people that kind of support, then they grow that much faster. And then they learn to love the profession that we're in and respect it and understand that if we do this and we do it right, it's hard work, but it's not impossible work. When you throw somebody out there and you just say sink or swim, I'm going to tell you what, they're going to paddle for a little bit, but then a whole bunch of them, they're just like, forget this, get me out of the pool. And so, our profession has to understand that, we've got to show the people, that we're in charge of, what it is, the value you do bring and the real, difference you can make in society, and I don't think we do that enough. And we don't, like I say, the real kids we're trying to save, we don't make enough decisions and we don't design everything around. How do we make sure those kids are successful? My kid is going to be successful. I'm going to see to it as a parent, I'm educated, I know what it takes. And she's got lots of support from family and everywhere else and friends. She's going to make, a successful person, just as my 3 older ones have, And here's the thing, that's great. And I think our school does a great job with her. But whether my school does a great job or a mediocre job, she's still going to find success. But the kids that don't have that, we have to do a great job with. And so we got to design a system to make sure we do that. And we don't talk enough about that. What we tend to do, and this is just being honest, we're going to be disruptive. So I'm just going to say, what we tend to do, we tend to move where that doesn't exist. And then we complain about the place we move from where it exists. That's the problem. We move away.
Yeah.
We don't have segregation by race anymore, but we got a whole lot of segregation by economics.
For sure. I mean,
and I can promise you're at a school that doesn't have, low socioeconomic kids who go home to, generational poverty. Life's a lot easier. I don't care what you say. When they talk about, everything from vouchers and everything else, thing about charters and private schools, you know what they do? They choose who they want to educate. And I got news for you. They don't choose the hard ones. They choose the ones that are easy to educate. If you let a coach choose his own athletes, he's only going to choose the good one.
For sure. And I think we should just admit that. I mean, if I can pick a team, I'm not going to pick people I want to win.
Exactly. But if we want everybody to have a fair shake at the world and be able to go out and write their own future, then guess what? We got to teach the hard ones. We got to teach that no one prepared.
You said something else. You said something else I want to talk a little bit about critical mass. Like you're doing that. I love that you're building that culture with your staff and that leadership space to build that critical mass. And I think it comes back to that reverence and getting them all on board with what they're working towards this common goal of helping all students. So is there a story like Gary, how much time do we have? Do we have time for a quick story, or do you have or are there questions before I ask this question?
Yeah. And so no questions, but we do have a comment from Superintendent Eric Setterstrom, if I pronounced his name right. He said, "Great job, Steve. Keep fighting the good fight." So
Eric and I worked together. Eric came over here to Pine Tree with me when I first came, and he's a big part of everything we do in helping us to develop that. And he understands what the fight is and what it's about. And I think that's important for everybody to get. And you talked about the critical mass. It's kind of like the wave at the Super Bowl. Enough people start doing it. Next thing you know, you get 120,000 people in the stadium doing it. And that's what we're trying to do. And here's the thing: our culture, it doesn't stop, with our staff. The next step is to make sure we instill it in our students. And that takes more time because you're trying to develop these habits in them, and then you want them to influence the others around them. And so, we're working, okay, what do we do about the new kid that comes in his sophomore year? How do we instill that in him? So we're looking at how can we set up some new student, kind of like an anchor academy, but it's like a new student academy. How do we sit there and build this within our kids? And then as we start, if you walk on any one of our elementaries and you ask the kids, what do we do here when nobody works harder than us and we believe in hard work and respect? Every kid's going to tell you that. Well, that's the kind of culture you want. And so you start to build that all the way throughout your district and your kids. Well, guess what? We want to spill it from there. We want to spill it into our community. What do we envision? We envision a community that understands the battle we're fighting and is willing to help us fight that battle, with whether it's with their time, their energy or their resources, that they understand we're all in this together. And if we take the strugglers of our community, struggling kids of our community, and we turn them into good, productive adults, how much better does our community get? Instead of, moving away and pretending that problem doesn't exist, why don't we just fix it?
We had an interview, a 2-part interview a couple weeks ago, and the superintendent mentioned that he was one of those hard to teach students, and how this angel, he mentions 2 angels in his life that came along, and of course, like, he had to be willing to meet the expectations of that angel. And our students who are hard to reach, there has to be something in them that's willing to meet the challenges and the expectations we have as leaders. But sometimes we're not going to see them. We're not going to see that seed, or that seed turn into something wonderful until way later.
Well,
And I have to imagine,
we're
I
planting
have
trees,
to
but we're never going to
imagine.
sit the shade up,
Yeah, that's what I was literally just going to say, that a society grows great by individuals who plant trees that we won't, when you don't get to see the shade like that. And that's what you do every day as a superintendent, and leading your team that leads the teachers, that leads the students, and then impacts the community. And so, yeah, I think that's the thing, is the leadership development that you're doing. That's something remarkable. But I love, I keep going back to the word reverence. There's such a reverence for doing this work with students. And so I'm encouraged by that. I know our listeners, some are listening now and some will listen later. And I just encourage our listeners to continue to honor the field of education. And as a parent, I think it's also important to honor the teachers. If your teacher notices something in a student, I don't know if you want to speak on this for a minute, if we have a little bit of time, but when a teacher notices something, or a school notices something in your child, like, honor their profession and meet that with some level of respect. And so we can work together and partner for our kids.
I think that's, even bigger than school. If you're in the public service of any kind, so much of society today, we really don't have a lot of, patience or a lot of understanding for them, and I think a lot of that comes from the leaders, from political leaders and stuff. They'll be real quick to throw, somebody under the bus, for what they didn't do. I'll be honest with you, you take the terrible tragedy at Uvalde. Well, our governor stepped up and he's willing to throw all law enforcement up underneath the bus and all their failure and everything else. We didn't talk about funding and how he hadn't pushed for more funding for schools or anything else. It was all law enforcement's fault, and somebody propped the door open and everything. There's not any reverence there, and so then people, start thinking, well, I can just treat everybody that way. Well, that's not how a good society is supposed to run. We're supposed to respect people. Are people perfect? No, they're not. But it doesn't mean they're not trying to be. Our people work really hard. Do my teachers, not do as good a job some days that they do on others? Well, yeah. But here's the thing, we're not throwing them under the bus for it. We're going to go grow them, teach it, train them up through it, and the way, we don't allow people to come in and mistreat our people. they don't get paid to get mistreated. They get paid to change kids' lives. And so, if somebody wants to come in and mistreat you, they're going to deal with me. I get paid. I get paid the big bucks. Okay, so I'm the one. I'm the one that have to put up with all that mess because that I get paid enough for that. They don't. And so we make sure we keep that buffer in front because I think I need them to want to do the job. And I got teachers that love kids, that love what they do, and they work hard. It's not easy. We tell everybody we're not selling easy. We're selling special, and special. Special is hard work.
I love that. Not selling easy, selling special.
Yeah, you focused on a lot of areas that I don't think gets enough coverage when we talk about education. Being intentional, being consistent, relationships, and yeah, I think it goes. I mean, it's something students can pick up on as well, right? So not just the staff, but the students. And I have a friend of mine. His his kids are going to one of the major universities here in Texas. One of the very bright students. And one thing they didn't think about, they're majoring in software engineering, and he was really pushing this relationship aspect of it. And so they were intentional about that, and they started trying to form a relationship with one of the instructors that had been very helpful to them. And so I think they just sent an email, just giving an update on what they did this summer, and asked how well that instructor actually brought them in on a project to develop an app for the instructor's company. Just little things like that of developing relationships and showing you care about somebody. And it doesn't matter how much you know, right? At the end of the day, there's a lot more to it as a human being, as a functioning member of society, as you mentioned,
Well, we talk everything, and we talk so much about money and how much you can make. Money makes life easier. Let's be honest. It's nice to be able to go down and afford whatever you need, or sometimes even what you want. But more importantly, it's about doing something that has a purpose behind it, that you're contributing and adding value to your community and to the world. And to me, our profession is one of the best at giving you an opportunity to do that. And so I just think we need to recognize that. And we need our people to recognize that. And we get more people coming into teaching right now through alternative certification than we do through traditional means, which means us that are educators aren't doing a very good job of recruiting our kids to go into it. But once they get out there in the real world and they get out there and they're like, gosh, I'm just doing this for a paycheck, there's no purpose behind it. Next thing you know, they're like, I think I want to teach. And it's funny, they'll work for less money and come over and work harder for us, but they love it that much more because they understand the value in what they're providing to other people. We're a social creature. That's what people, humans are. And so we need that. And, we happen to be in a profession that really makes that possible.
Yep. And I wondered how much, that kind of mindset of thinking about more of the core human being, I wonder if that gets lost depending on, if you have a massive district and you can't build those relationships as much, or you don't have you're just dealing with a lot more moving parts. I wonder if that element gets lost. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it does. I mean, if you look at schools that I spent most of my career in small schools. It's easier in small schools because there's less people you have to convince. That critical mass is a lot smaller mass to get going. At a larger school, it gets harder. To me, I've often thought, how would you take this model and break it into a bigger school? Well, I'm going to break it into pieces. And we're going to have, it would almost like we would, you got to almost run as like 5 districts all rolled into one, and I can tell you, this job's harder at this level because instead of visiting 3 campuses, I'm visiting 7 every day, and you're getting on those campuses and you're building relationships. Instead of building a relationship with 150 employees, I'm building it with 690 employees, so that's a lot more time and effort on my part, but that's what it takes.
No, it's interesting, and I think that's something that definitely deserves some attention is that side of the equation. And I remember going to when I went to Texas A&M and I joined the Corps of Cadets, and a lot of the cadets were from smaller schools, right? And I just remember some of the leadership abilities of these these students that came from smaller schools. I was like, wow, this is a school some of the schools I hadn't even heard of before, but it was just this really strong leader. And so yeah, that human element, and I know we talked about technology earlier. And there's just there's so much noise out there right now, and I can really appreciate what you're saying around taking a step back and really evaluating the individual, and the intentionality, the consistency, the relationships, the reverence, and just those characteristics that need to be focused on.
Well, we're in the people business, and sometimes it's adult people, and sometimes it's adolescent people, and sometimes it's little bitty people. It's still teaching them how to function in society and in their environment. We want to come up with all these different things that somebody has, and people tend to use those as an excuse on why they can't. A lot of people look at our poor kids and they want to come up with every reason on why they can't. We believe in finding solutions to prove that they can. I don't take excuses. It's just like, if you take my life skills class, a lot of those kids have got some medical problems and things of that nature that they're not going to overcome. But here's the thing, what's our job there? They may never live on their own, but we want them to live as independent and fulfilling life as we can possibly give them. So we need to push them to be everything they can be, because we don't know where that ceiling is. So we're going to push them as hard as we can every day, because otherwise you're just saying, oh, we're just going to say we can't do this. And so they're going to spend the rest of their life in the institution. Well, no, I can't, could that possibly happen because the kids, is severe enough? Well, it might, but it's not going to be from a lack of trying. I can tell you that. We got about, I think about 4 minutes left here. I was going to turn it over to my deputy soup, Jonathan Hagerman. He came to us a year ago, and almost exactly a year ago. And so, he came from Arkansas to a real small school as a superintendent, and then came over here and joined us as be his largest district to be at as well. But just to kind of get his take on culture and how he feel. I mean, because he's bought in, he's drank the Kool-Aid, I'll tell you that. But,
yeah, let's hear it.
But as an outsider who came in just a year ago, and how the culture kind of got ingrained in him, automatically. Like I say, he's one of those guys that when we interviewed, and actually I got his name through Dr. Cedarstrom that just chimed in, and Dr. Cedarstrom didn't even know him. He met him at a conference and sat down with him and called me up and said, "Hey, call this guy. He believes like we do." And so that's kind of how it started. But so understand he believes along the same lines we do. But the way him and his entire family has bought into the culture and just become ingrained in it, it's like they've been here forever. So I wanted him to share that little bit with y'all.
Thank you.
He wasn't ready for this, but
this was not planned. So yeah,
hello, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, like I think yesterday was a year ago. Yesterday is when I interviewed for this job, and one of the things I remember when I was visiting is I came from a very small school. We were actually K-6. We had about 150 kids, and I was everything. I was the principal, I was superintendent, I was the backup bus driver, I was the custodian on some days. I said, who does what here? And Steve Clugston said, well, like we all do everything. Like we know what our strengths and our weaknesses are, but when we come across fire, we're going to kick dirt on it until the person that knows how to put it out shows up. And I thought, man, I can do that. And really, I've been a lot of places where people say words, but when it comes to action, it's different. So I got here October 1st last year. Like I said, this is year 16 in education for me. My wife is an elementary teacher. I've got 4 kids, 2 boys that are ours and 2 girls that are adopted. And it just kind of fell right in. I mean, the truth is, we don't. I guess you could say we lead from the top, but we really don't. We really just work from where we're at. There really isn't a top. There's not a this is my job or your job. Everybody's working together to accomplish the same goals. And I don't know that I've ever been anywhere like that. I've coached and taught at my alma mater where I graduated high school. I've been in rural schools. I've been in urban schools. I've been in a lot of small schools. But the truth is, like, every one of us believe in the goal for our kids, and we're all working to get there. And sometimes we have different views on how we think that should be done. But the great thing is we all believe that we want the same thing. So we all work really well together. Because if we all believe the same thing, we all want the same thing, then we all believe that we're all trying to get there. And that allows us to use each other's strengths. It's okay for me to step aside and say, I don't know how to do this. It's okay for me to say, hey, hold on, let me step in. I know how to do this. And that's not true in very many organizations.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And it's very nice to meet you. And it seems like what you're describing is something that organizations strive to do, right? But they don't always accomplish it. Having that teamwork, having that camaraderie, having that culture where everyone's working together and looking out for each other. So that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And congrats.
We're gonna have to have you individually on the podcast now, because this is a summit we have our regular podcast where we interview guests once a week. So we definitely now have a new person we want to reach out to. I love that you said leading from the top versus leading together. I think that's the model for the future, because you said it's something really, really simple. And I think we should let our listeners should take a minute and think, do you do that when you see something? Do you just roll up your sleeves and get it done and not worry, am I the superintendent? Does someone else need to do it? No, it's a fire. Put the fire out. We're doing this together. So I love that you said that. And I appreciate that. The best leaders are servant leaders. And it sounds like y'all have that figured out.
Well, I remember my first year here, I'm, clean, kid in the throws up in the cafeteria. So I go grab a mop, start cleaning up. So I'm not doing a very good job. And one of the custodians shows up, so Mr. Clugston, get out of the way and give me that. I know what I'm doing. You know? And I mean, but that's the thing. We don't worry so much about Lane. She wasn't offended that I was doing it. She appreciated the fact, even though I wasn't doing a good job, she's like, okay, I'm here now, go. And, and so we worry less about lanes, and let's just do the job until somebody who's better at the job shows up to do it.
Worry less about lanes. Gary, when you name this section, maybe you say that. Worry less about lanes.
Exactly. Yeah, it takes ego out of the equation. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's hard I would say it's hard to work here and worry about ego. That just, that hurts team, and we can't do things that hurt team.
Yep. No, awesome. Well, we have our next speaker coming up. I just want to thank you again for your time today and sharing your wisdom. And so those of y'all that are live, I'm sure you enjoyed that session. And then we're going to have this recording actually on several platforms for other leaders in education or those that are interested in education to listen to. And so thank you again. And